Morning everyone. Magandang maga po sa lahat. Um, we're still waiting for a few more people, but I think majority of the important stakeholders are here, so we can begin. This meeting is now called to order, and before we continue, um, let me direct the ComSec to acknowledge our resource persons for this morning.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to acknowledge our guests and resource persons for today's public hearing, the first public hearing of the Committee on Energy for the 18th Congress. For the Department of Energy, Director Patrick Aquino. For the Energy Regulatory Commission, Attorney R.J. Louis Cunanan. From the National Transmission Corporation, Mr. Alipio Agaton. From the National Power Corporation, Ms. Beverly Estrella. From the Department of Finance, Yusek Bayani Agabin. From the Department of Trade and Industry, Engineer Mario Gaudiano. From the Department of Science and Technology, Engineer Rodnel Tamayo. Engineer Romel Corona. From the Board of Investments, Ms. Evariste Katagan. From the Land Transportation Office, Attorney Clarence Ginto. From the Metro Manila Development Authority, ASEC Jose Ocampo. From the Philippine Competition Commission, Mr. Ken Tanate, Attorney Faye Condes. From the Manila Electric Company, Mr. Anthony Agoncillo and Mr. Romel Felizardo. From the Electric Vehicles Association of the Philippines, Mr. Edmond Araga and Professor Manny Biona. From the Management Association of the Philippines, Mr. Ernesto Pantanco. From Isakay Incorporated, Mr. Raymond Ravelo. And for our guest observers, we would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Takahiro Yamasaki from BMAC Electric Transportation, Philippines. And from the Guider International E-Trike Electronics Assembly, Philippines, Engineer Yusef Ahmad. To those guests and resource persons who have presentation materials, you can approach Ms. Carla right there so she can assist you. Thank you.
Thank you, ComSec. Before we begin, I would like to share with everyone a few slides that I gathered over the years about the state of our mass transportation here in the Philippines. Sige, Carla. Yan po yung araw-araw natin nakikita, especially pag summer. And a lot of our old PUVs, even our buses, ganito po yung nakikita natin almost araw-araw. Next slide. At pag nag-aantay po yung mga commuters ho natin, obviously unang-una nalalanghap ho nila ng alas 6 ng umaga, no, yung mga fumes na lumalabas po sa ating mga public utility vehicles. Next slide. And the worst, pati yung mga anak ho natin na pumapasok po every morning to school, ganyan din naamoy nila. Lead. So this is actually worse than second-hand smoking. And imagine, wala hong pinipili yung ating mga, wala hong pinipiling tao pag nakalanghap po ng pollution from our public utility vehicles. So this is actually just a few pictures that will demonstrate the state of our public utility vehicles in our country, in which it's clouded in a cloud of pollution. Next. I shared this slide in the 7th EVAP event in SMX. And before we continue, let me acknowledge one of our new members. Ito ho, talagang napakasipag, nakita ko. Kasama ko pa ho ito sa MMDA when I was a mayor. When I was a mayor, Chairman Francis Tolentino was my chairman in the MMDA. Marami ho kaming reforms na in-implement during those times. Matanda na ho kaming dalawa sa public service. Let me acknowledge President Senator Francis Tolentino.
Persons present here. Morning to our chair.
And I was saying, when I was invited in the 7th EVAP event, I showed many slides, but this is probably the most important slides out of many slides I demonstrated. That in 2024, the price of an internal combustion engine, yung mga nakikita natin at binibili nating traditional vehicles, will be at parity with electric vehicles. No? So this is very important because 2024 is not so far away. No? Isang tulugan na lang, 2024 na. But the concept here is, wag na natin antayin 2024 before we do all of these things. No? We need to make sure that we have the ecosystem in place. We have to make sure that the industry is alive and vibrant so that when 2024 comes in, it's easy for our consumers to adapt and switch to e-vehicles. And that's precisely what we want, is to have faster adoption of e-vehicles so that we have cleaner environment, we can help reduce importation of oil, which is about 90% of our demand, our necessities, and achieve energy security, hopefully in the near future. So that's why 2024 is the magic year. However, we need to put everything in place now so that when 2024 comes in, we have the necessary laws, necessary framework, and the infrastructure in place so that our consumers will have easier time to adopt and switch to e-vehicles. I think the benefits of e-vehicles is probably one of the most important transition in our public transportation system. With that, I talked to Yusek Agabin earlier, and incentives, the support of DOF is very important to this industry. However, Yusek has to go to a very important executive committee meeting. But since DOF is an integral part of this development, in the development of this industry, we want to hear the comments of Yusek Agabin before he joins his executive ExCom meeting.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Senator Tolentino. Thank you for this opportunity to express our views on the pending bill. We support the purpose of the bill, Your Honor, in that it will promote the use of e-vehicles. However, we express concern with respect to the VAT exemption that's proposed to be granted in the bill. If you recall, Your Honor, under the train law, we tried to limit the exemptions granted under the VAT law so that we'll have a wider tax base. The proposal to grant VAT exemptions on the sale of e-vehicles, we believe, Your Honor, is not the proper way to incentivize the sale of e-vehicles. We believe that we have enough laws to encourage the development of the e-vehicles here. For example, we have the BOI, which grants income tax holidays and tax and duty-free importation of equipment. And so they can avail of that, Your Honor. And in addition to that, Your Honor, and perhaps this may be a good way to pitch the Trabaho Bill. Under the Trabaho Bill, it will lower income tax rates across all classes. And if the manufacturer of e-vehicles will be qualified under the SIPP, Special Investment Package, then they will actually have more benefits, considering that it's a high technology industry. And so, again, Your Honor, we believe that granting VAT exemptions is not good policy at this point, considering that we have just enacted the Train 1, which limits exemptions. And to grant an exemption on VAT at this time may not be well advised. Okay. Another point, Your Honor, and perhaps our colleagues from the DTI and BOI can help us with that. I understand that the development of e-vehicles has been in the investment priority plan for the past 10 years. And despite that, there's not been that much take-up with respect to the industry. And perhaps they can share with us their experience, why it's not successful, and we can look at other avenues by which to encourage the development of e-vehicles. And so, yes, yes, Your Honor.
Alternative to the proposed VAT exemption, which he is objecting to.
Okay.
Under the law, I think there is a great interplay between the national government and the LGUs. Will you agree? Do you agree that the LGUs can provide their own exemption, especially to the charging stations which will be located within their jurisdiction?
Okay. No, I agree, Your Honor. Insofar as they have authority to impose local business taxes, then that's well within the jurisdiction of the LGU, Your Honor. So if they want to grant,
In totality, an investor can locate within an LGU, for instance, in Metro Manila, having, for instance, a terminal
okay.
housing several e-vehicles for mass transit system, and then provide the necessary exemptions, which, if you total it, would incrementally would be similar to the VAT exemption that you are objecting to.
Well, I cannot give a definite answer with respect to the totality, Your Honor. But as you may be well aware, there are local taxes and there are national taxes. Local taxes will be well within the jurisdiction of the LGU. So if they want to waive, or if the law will provide for exemption for real estate taxes, for example, and local business taxes, that's well within the jurisdiction of the LGU. And so I just do not know the fiscal equivalence, if that will be the same as the 12% VAT that will be that's proposed to be granted an exemption here. So, but in that sense, you can maybe consider that when you look at the total figures, Your Honor.
In line with the question of Senator Tolentino, the principle here, USEC, is to lower down the cost, at least in the short term, the importation of e-vehicles, importation of equipment to roll out charging stations and the charging station itself, and hasten the adoption of e-vehicles in our country. The other one, the principle behind giving incentives, is also to develop the industry as a whole. No? I think that can be answered later on by the BOI. But in the short term, why the industry is asking for fiscal incentives is really to allow them to import e-vehicles and compete head-to-head with the traditional ICE vehicles. No? Dahil mas mura talaga yung ICE vehicles right now, yung internal combustion engine. So, at least in the short term, before we reach parity, no? Kasi parity will come at 2024, is to allow them to compete by getting as much incentives as possible in importing e-vehicles. So that's the principle.
I understand, Your Honor, but I believe the avenue for that will be through the IPP at the BOI, and if it will be passed into law, then that will be the Trabaho Bill, Your Honor. Because under the current setup, BOI can already grant tax and duty-free importation of equipment. And so if it is included, I'm not sure if it's included now, it probably is. If it's included, then they can import already tax and duty-free equipment for e-charging, Your Honor.
In other words, DOF will support a framework wherein, an incentive framework wherein BOI will be the central incentive giving agency. It's within the BOI law and the BOI framework.
Yes, under the current setup, Your Honor, yes, that is the framework, and so we support that. I don't know what will come out of the Trabaho Bill, and then subject again to what will come out under the Trabaho Bill. But again, Your Honor, the Trabaho Bill will lower income taxes across the board, and it will give, in fact, more benefits to high technology industries that will qualify under the SIPP, Your Honor.
I ask the permission of the chair for leave to attend to several hearings because there are multiple hearings ongoing right now. But Mr. Chair, I believe that this committee is in good hands. You being the chairman also of the Committee on Science, but I don't see the presence here of the OST. The OST would have been a vital cog in developing our own e-vehicle system. DOST is there. Oh, sorry, dito ako nakatingin eh. So palagay ko this committee is in good hands, and I expect that this committee will be very, very productive, having known Senator Gatchalian to be a hard worker likewise. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Senator Tolentino. And likewise, I requested him to come back after the many hearings because si Chairman, malalim ang experience to pagdating sa mobility and public transportation dahil I remember during our MMDA days, yun ang isang mga problema ng Metro Manila is how to arrest traffic. So, having said that, USEC, outside of the BOI incentive scheme, no, DOF will not support, in other words. So, meaning VAT exemptions, tariff exemptions. One of the modes that the industry is requesting is to exempt it from taxes and tariffs, no? So that, or taxes and duties, so that when it comes here, it will be cheaper.
Your Honor, if they mean exemption from taxes and duties, from import tax and duties, they are already exempt, Your Honor. And in addition to that, under Train 1, I understand that sales of e-vehicles are already exempt from excise taxes. So that, in that sense, you already have an additional advantage, Your Honor.
Thank you, Sec. And in line with that, we would like to hear also from BOI, since we're now in the topic of incentives. I would like to hear comments from the BOI regarding making e-vehicles itself competitive, as well as developing the entire e-vehicles ecosystem and e-vehicles industry, because the perspective of DTI, from what I read in your studies, is to develop the industry itself, no? Not only yung importation ng vehicles, maglalagay tayo charging station, but the entire industry, no? So we want to hear your opinion on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the case of BOI, we fully support the objectives of the bill. And in fact, in the past Congress, we have also expressed our support, and we have also recommended that other than the incentives currently being provided under EO 226, we have even suggested that BOI be asked to craft a special program, incentives program for e-vehicle, akin to the Comprehensive Automotive Resurgence Strategy program, the CARS program. So this will be giving out some subsidies just to jumpstart the local development of the industry. So in terms of incentives under the Executive Order 226, those listed under the Investments Priorities Plan, it's true, since 2012, I think, manufacture of e-vehicles has been part of the priority list. And among the incentives that are given are income tax holiday of 4 to 6 years. 6 years if it's pioneering, 4 years if it's just the conventional technology that will be used. But our capital equipment incentive is based on EO 85 right now, which was just issued in July and became effective August, I think August 1 or August 2. And that only provides duty-free incentives. The tax has still to be paid. VAT has still to be paid. So the tax and duty free importation are part of the incentive package of PEZA. So those are for export-oriented industries. But for those that are registered with BOI, capital equipment incentives are just duty exempt. And apart from the IPP incentives, we also have the Motor Vehicle Development Program, for which completely knocked down parts can be imported at 0%. At 0%, if it's electric vehicle. If it's ICE, it's at 1%. And so I agree with the senator when he said that maybe because we're trying to develop the industry and really jumpstart the manufacture and streamlining or phasing in and mainstreaming the EV manufacture and adoption in the society, then perhaps DOF can also consider temporary or just a period of VAT exemption, just so our local manufacturers can bring down the costs. You said it's at by 2024, then maybe by 2024 it's not just parity, maybe it can even be more or cheaper even if that portion of VAT can be exempted. And also, if I can also already say some of our recommendations also, Mr. Chair. On the in the course of our consultations, we have found that instead of using the term electric vehicles, maybe we can use now the term electrified vehicles to include hybrid electric vehicles and other vehicles that may use batteries as source of energy. The electrified vehicles is an industry term recognized in the international community and defined as a vehicle equipped with a powertrain containing at least one electric motor or electric motor generator as propulsion energy converter. This is in the UNECE Mutual Resolution number 2 of the 1958 and 1998 agreements. And this includes pure electric vehicles, PEVs, or battery electric vehicles, BEVs, hybrid electric vehicles, HEVs, and fuel cell vehicles, FCVs. And aside from charging stations, it is also proposed that the bill also take into consideration other charging technologies such as swapping stations. And then on the proposed crafting of the EV manufacturing roadmap, through the DTI BOI road mapping activity, there is already an electric vehicle industry roadmap that has been prepared by the Electric Vehicles Association. And this was submitted to us in 2014 and revised in 2016. This one, sir, I think you have it. It may be considered, however, that we can update the roadmap to take into account the existing programs and initiatives and recent developments in the industry, both local and international. And instead of an annual roadmap, we propose that the roadmap provide a long-term plan with an annual work plan that will be prepared by relevant government agencies in cooperation with industry, academe, and other relevant stakeholders. And aside from the enumerated focus of the roadmap, it is suggested also that we include promotion of R&D and production of EVs and its parts in the roadmap activities. And in terms of the list of roles of the DTI, the establishment of standards is through our Bureau of Philippine Standards. Actually, they already have a working group, TC44, that is working on standards for motor vehicles and its parts, and they have a sub-working group for EVs. And then, and as for the road mapping initiative, this is really done by the Board of Investments. And as I said, on the proposed incentives, the manufacture of EVs and its parts is already included in the 2017 IPP. And aside from the assembly and manufacture of electrified vehicles, the IPP also includes the manufacture of parts and operation of charging stations. So, and then further, manufacturers of EVs may participate in the Motor Vehicle Development Program, as I said, which provides a preferential tariff for importation of the knockdown parts used in the assembly of the vehicles. And again, I'd like to repeat that we'd like a provision in the bill to say that the BOI to craft a special incentive subsidy program to develop the local EV that could include fiscal and non-fiscal incentives. That's all, sir.
Director, thank you for sharing that with us. No, but I learned that from Yusek Agabin also that yung e-vehicles and all of this, no, the industry is already part of the IPP. No? Kailan ho siya naging part ng IPP?
As far as I recall, sir, 2012, it has been listed in the Investments Priorities Plan.
So 2012 ho siya naging kasama ng IPP. And when you say kasama ng IPP, it gets all the incentives under the BOI law.
The main incentives of which would be the ITH and the duty-free importation of capital equipment.
Okay. This is for the industry, no?
Yes.
But kasama na ho dyan yung pag-import ng vehicles itself?
Hindi, sir. That should be for the manufacturer.
For the manufacturer.
For the manufacturer.
Sige, let's focus on the manufacturer. How come from that then on, since 2012 until now, ilan po ang nag-apply dito po sa incentive package na ito?
Under the IPP, sir, not much. Most of them would go to the MVDP scheme instead. So that they can import the parts that they would be assembling at zero duty. It was only, but there are some companies that would register with BOI just so to comply with the LTO requirement that it should be BOI registered. I think that was also asked of LTO before. But I'm not sure, sir, why in the past they have not really been registering for the income tax holiday incentive.
In other words, wala hong nag-take advantage
Meron
nitong...
po. But we actually in our roster we have some 14 registered companies.
And they're operating, this
Yes,
14.
sir.
They're all operating. This is under the BOI
Yes, sir.
incentive package.
Yes, sir.
Itong MVDP, this is outside of the BOI.
It's a different law, EO 156.
Okay. And this
But
allows...
but administered by BOI
by
as
BOI
well.
also. And this allows importation of semi-knockdown,
No, completely knocked down.
completely knockdown
Yes, sir.
units. Ito
Yes.
ho, ilan ang take advantage nitong...
I think, sir, I'm sorry I didn't bring the list, but all in all, with what I have, there are just, sir, less than 20 for e-vehicles. Maybe because nga, sir, mahal pa kasi, sir, di ba? Mahal kasi yung e-vehicles when you do. Usually mga e-trikes, e-bikes, ganyan lang.
So in your opinion, Director, we consider this incentive package or packages successful?
Personally, sir, I think they would need more support, and that's why what we think is that a special program akin to a CARS, the CARS program would be good support to the e-vehicle industry. That's why we have been pushing for that since the last Congress.
And you have that that framework CARS framework that can be adopted to
Yes, we
e-vehicles?
already have the comprehensive automotive resurgence strategy. We want to develop something like that for EV, but because cars is ICE, so meron hong syempreng magiging difference na sa package for the e-vehicle. But ang concept I think would be also to give subsidy so that the assembly of parts would really be jump-started.
Ma'am, can you mention that BOI is inclined to develop this industry, no?
Yes,
EV
sir.
industry. Meron naman kayong study, for example, how many jobs will be created, how many new skills will be created, because these are new skills. No? Electric vehicles will develop new forms of skills, no? Particularly for that industry. Meron naman kayong mga ganitong
The most recent initiative that the DTI has under our competitive and innovation group within DTI, they have partnered with Mitsubishi and 5 academic institutions to study. I think Dr. Biona would be able to tell more about that study, and I think part of that study would be those that the good senator is asking about.
All right, Director. I think si Edmond is raising his hands. No? Edmond?
Good morning, Mr. Senator. Mr. Chair, with regards to the one that you're inquiring from BOI, only a few members who take the advantage of the MBDP program and also the EO 226. They were the pioneer producer of e-trikes and e-jeeps in the Philippines. Now, the problem with that incentives was there's no demand really, and we have some difficulty on addressing this concern. That's why the cost was one of the main components that we want to address with. And specifically, if it is not incentivized, there's a big hurdle on the part of the manufacturer and the producer of the electric vehicles. And I, for instance, one of my company before who availed of the pioneering stage for the BOI program, and this is in line with the NEEDS program that I'm telling with Madam Eris, that part of the BOI incentives was to be part of the accreditation of NEEDS program under LTO for you to be a certified manufacturer and assembler. And we address all concerns on part of the assembly line and the manufacturing side. But we still cannot develop the consumers or the customers that we want to partake in. So that's why before we do the EO 226 program and the MBDP, there is a lot of study being approved by BOI on how many jobs could be provided if this would take for a 5 to 6 year program. And unluckily, from the time that it was being granted 2012 up to the present, there's a very slim chance of providing job generating programs on that aspect. Simply because it's only this recently that we take off on the production of the e-jeeps and the e-trikes, but particularly on the e-jeep side, because there is integrated PUB modernization program that helps to pipe in or to encourage these consumers to buy electric vehicles. And to give you more data on it, Doc Manny Biona, as EVAP Executive Director, also provided some slides to further elaborate all those concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Before I present this one, I'd just like to comment on the discussions right now on industry development. In the study we conducted with DTI, we reviewed the strategies of different countries. And I think there's a lot to be learned in the experiences of other countries. It was seen that in countries that were successful in adopting EVs, they came up with an integrated strategy, wherein industry development is coupled with demand generation. So no one will be investing on you if you don't have that demand. And that's where the importance of providing user side incentives. So BOIs they're providing manufacturing side incentives, but if you don't have the demand, and the demand is only developed through user side incentives, okay, this industry will never take off. Maybe that's the reason why BOI had difficulties in attracting investors. It's because it's really because of the demand. So later on, I'll be presenting the framework that we're proposing under the DTI study, and it's an integrated strategy. It was patterned also after based on other countries.
Professor, since we have a lot of resource persons, let's go straight to the point, and let's keep our presentation to at least 5 minutes to 10 minutes.
So do I present now?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Po.
Okay. Maybe since the discussion is more on the strategy, I'd like to go straight to the proposed EV Philippines strategy. Yeah. No, not that one. Before that. Okay. Yeah. Okay, forward, please. Okay, forward. Not that one. Okay, forward. Yeah, this one. So this is the strategy that we're proposing based on the DTI study that we conducted. Okay, we're proposing that integrated strategy based on 4 pillars will be implemented. It's based on demand generation, EV cost reduction, charging infrastructure development, and industry development. Okay, we call this pillar because if you remove one, okay, everything of this will fall. Okay, okay, please press. Okay. This framework also can be used to define the roles of the different agencies. So basically, demand generation can be taken on by DOTR. DOE can focus on charging infra development. Industry development could be led by DTI in cooperation with the LTO, TNR, and TESTA. And DTI in cooperation with the DOF could focus on EV cost reductions. Yeah, next slide.
Professor, maputol ko lang kayo, no?
Yeah.
Can you go back? Yung EV cost reduction, no? Do you have some form of comparative study? Let's say, of course, yung cost reduction, we're chasing after the ICE, presyo ng ICE vehicles, no? So, to make it competitive. But do you have a comparative analysis? Let's say, ito ang presyo ng Vios, ito presyo ng, let's say, Tesla, no?
Yeah, there is in the previous slide.
Okay. And then, how much do we need to how much government needs to grant in order to make it at parity at this time, no? At this point.
At this point. Okay, previous slide, please. Previous slide. Okay. So this provides now the retail cost comparison based on Philippine taxation right now. This considering already the train law incentives that's provided for PHEV and EVs. So as you will see there, in all cases, ICE is still very cheap compared to PHEVs and BEVs. You have also in that slide the different multipliers. So that's the range of multipliers for BEVs and PHEVs in comparison with ICEs. Now, I think the removal of importation tariff would just basically level the playing field, because right now we're getting most of our ICEs from Thailand and also from countries wherein we have a free trade agreement. So it's basically either 5% or 0% importation tariff. But in the case of EVs, we'll be getting them most from right now from Japan. Okay, from Korea, yes, we have the agreement from Japan, from China, and also from Europe. So in that case, the importation tariff will be a little bit high. So if you would observe there under the ICEs, the importation tariff for ICEs that's based on the current supply chain is very low because we're getting them mostly from within the ASEAN.
Professor, let me just break this down a bit. Yung MC car, which is a mini compact sedan.
Yeah.
Ang dito sa slide ninyo, yung unang bar is the ICE vehicle.
ICE, yeah.
Doon sa MC car, meron kang battery electric vehicle, tsaka meron kang plug-in hybrid.
hybrids. Yes.
So, in your slide, mas mahal talaga yung
battery electric.
Yung battery electric tsaka itong plug-in
hybrid, yeah.
So your argument here is to remove the importation tariff, excise tax, and VAT.
Yes.
Pero kahit tanggalin nyo, hindi pa rin siya magiging mura eh.
Yes, hindi pa rin siya magiging mura, but somehow, if you look at now the total life cycle cost, it will now be parity.
At this point,
Okay, at this point, it will not be parity if you remove those based on the total life cycle cost. I have a slide for that, but I didn't include it in this presentation.
Okay.
But it's included in the DTI study.
Okay.
So that's actually the
so the
basis.
life cycle cost at this point, meaning to operate
Yes.
the vehicle, is at
If you
parity
remove
with-
those, it's going to be at parity.
Wala tayong slide na yun.
Hindi ko nasama dito yung
Yung
slide na
importante
yun.
ha,
Yeah.
para makita ni Yusek
Yeah.
Bayani. But at this point, at face value, parang doesn't make sense removing it because it will not...
We actually
impact
did.
anything.
We actually also did the simulation. We did market research. We did simulations on what's the impact of the removal of importation tariff and excise taxes. We didn't remove VAT in that simulation. So in the best case scenario, if we remove those by 2030, the annual sales will be around 40,000 to 50,000. But without removal of the tariff, we're only looking at around a little more than 10,000 units. So it's basically going to push for the adoption of the vehicles.
And dito sa retail cost, sa mini compact sedan, what you're saying is, ang battery electric is 1.95 times more expensive than ICE vehicles.
Yes.
And basically, yan ang sinasabi
Yeah.
dyan, di ba? Now, I hope we can demonstrate to the public magkano ba talaga ang, let's say, ICE, magkano ang BEV, magkano ang plug-in,
Yeah.
and then we can look at the different components,
Yeah.
and then compare it also with the life cycle because this is the retail price eh.
Yes.
Alam mo, ang retail price, yan ang basehan ng maraming consumer natin kung ano yung nakapost doon sa catalog. Yun ang they don't look at the life cycle. Bihira tumitingin ng life cycle eh. But
Yeah.
we also need to understand that because part of the marketing attractiveness of e-vehicles is the life cycle, no?
Yeah.
Mas murang spare parts, mas mura ang to operate, no? But we need to educate the public with that because this is what they see
Yeah.
when they choose.
Yeah, we have the life cycle cost. We also broke down the maintenance cost per kilometer and everything. We look at the energy cost.
Yeah,
the
pakisubmit
over
na
the
lang sa amin
future.
kung wala ngayon.
Yeah, I think it was submitted. It will be
Okay,
forwarded, I
sige.
guess. Yeah.
Alright,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Forward, please. Okay, forward. So under demand generation, so these are the proposals. I'm not going to go through each of the bullet points, just the general. So provision of or introduction of regulations on the adoption of EVs in corporate fleets, public transport, government vehicles, and introduction of some fringe benefits. Okay, next slide. EV cost reduction, be importation tariff exemptions for BEVs and PHEVs. Excise tax exemptions, we know that BEVs have zero excise taxes already. So we're actually proposing the PHEV be classified also as similar to BEVs in terms of excise tax exemptions. Okay, I have actually a slide there showing why PHEV is very important in this whole strategy. Value-added tax reduction exemptions on a limited scale, and then eco-PUV programs. This was mentioned earlier by BOI. Okay, next slide. And then for charging infra development, so we need also integrated approach here. So one is come up with an EV charging infrastructure development plan, come up with EV charging infrastructure regulations, charging equipment tariff and tax exemptions, charging standards, protocols, and installation policies, reduce power rates and charging rate settings. So for example, if you look at our bills, around 70 centavos are more of share of the consumer on the subsidies. So that is something that could be considered to be removed. And demonstration of programs will be very important as well. Okay, next slide. And then for industry development, this is quite long. So you have EV standard, EV assembly and parts production incentives program. This was mentioned by BOI. Local EV industry fund, Okay, based on consultations with the local EV players, they're having a hard time despite the loans provided under the PUV modernization program. The cash flow is is a little bit slow, so they're having a hard time priming up their production. Okay, vehicle classification harmonization. This is somehow addressed already. EVAP is working with the LTO and coming up with aligning their classifications with the UNEC standards, which are used by Bureau of Customs and BPS. Specific tariff for EVs, specific tariff code for EVs, so that it becomes more flexible. But I think this is already addressed according to the Tariff Commission. The EV standards testing and capability building. This is something that needs to be streamlined. Okay, next slide. Okay, battery local manufacturing rule. Coming up with the battery local manufacturing roadmap. When we broke down the cost of the vehicles, the main part really it would be the batteries. So localizing the batteries would provide a lot of jobs locally. Transport and and auto informatics industry roadmap. Okay, future projections indicates that around 40% of the vehicle cost in the future will be on the software side, and this is something that Philippines could really go into. EV human resource development. Look, we actually outlined in the study all the competency requirements and also the certification needed for skills development, lead EV research and development programs. Come up with the local EV research development programs, okay, and then introduce an information education campaign. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, other updates. EVAP worked with LTO on the classification of electric vehicles. I think that will be presented later on by LTO. And in fact, under the DTI study, we also look at whether the country will have enough power. And based on the simulations, that's for the Luzon grid, which is expected to be having most of the vehicles, even in the Luzon grid, the required additional peak power will be very minimal, well within the projected capacity additions of the Department of Energy. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, submit to us also that EVAP study on the whole industry, no? Meaning how many jobs will be created, what are the skills, new skills that we can create, as well as I asked this during the last hearing. One of the selling points of electric vehicles is improve in air quality. No? Meron ba tayong study on how air quality will be improved?
We did the cost and benefit analysis. We covered health impact, health benefits. We covered tax revenue impacts. We covered trade balance. We covered greenhouse gas social cost, and we also covered job generation. Okay, and in the results, if we're producing the vehicle here locally, okay, it will create a lot of benefits for the country.
Just off top, like how many jobs will be created?
For the jobs, it's almost at parity because you somehow also reduce the jobs on the part of maintenance. Okay, but if we're producing the batteries here, that also creates a lot of jobs.
How many jobs are you?
We defined it in terms of value, peso, in terms of passive values on jobs, because we make use of the input-output matrix of the economic input-output table of the country. So we cannot specifically identify how much jobs, but we can identify the amount of jobs in terms of salaries paid.
Ano na lang yung paki-estimate.
Yeah,
It's easy to explain how many jobs.
Okay, it's in
will
the
be created.
we can estimate that one based on the average.
In terms of health.
In terms of health,
costs,
definitely,
like for
I
example,
think it's
the air
on the.
quality will improve, therefore people will not get sick, and
I think I have
government will
actually I have a graph there. So this one for example, that is why EVs in Philippines health. Okay, these are just my backup slides. So as you will see there, especially for the bigger size vehicles which are diesel dominated, so diesel creates a lot of health impacts even at Euro 4. Euro 4 it's quite low already, but comparing that with EVs, EV health impacts are very minimal compared to. So those are health impact costs for each of the vehicles for the different variants. So it's quite big.
Did you quantify this in terms of, let's say, how much is healthcare cost?
Okay, it's based on sometime in 2001, World Bank sponsored a study for Metro Manila, determining the health impact of air pollution. So there's the there's the air pollution load, and then there's the corresponding cost. So based on those value, you can basically get there the amount of health impact per ton of emissions emitted, and then that is adjusted based on the population density of Metro Manila and was adjusted also based on the inflation rates. So that's where this, and then we quantify the amount of emissions created from these vehicles throughout its life.
Do you have that now?
Yeah, that one actually is that's already the resulting health impact.
This is the
The
What is
resulting
it?
net present
Impact.
value of the health
okay.
impacts. Yes, those are already the results.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But this is not, for example, in terms of how much government spends to treat
No.
air pollution-related diseases
No,
or
no.
complication. Meron ba tayong ganun? So it's easy to quantify?
It's hard to separate,
For
but
example,
if there is data, then we
meron ka,
can.
nakagka-pneumonia ka, and magkano ba mag-treat to pneumonia, and how much government is...
We're actually doing a separate study right now outside of this current study. We're really modeling the health impacts. We're doing that for DNR for another project. So we're modeling the health impacts in Metro Manila, and that's where we really quantify the amount of pneumonia effects, amount of bronchitis
just
effects.
to
and
simulate. No need
yeah,
to
we
simulate.
can simulate that in the
How about
study that we're
greenhouse
doing right now.
gases,
Okay,
GHG?
greenhouse gases. Next slide,
Meron ba
please.
tayo?
Okay, next slide. Okay, slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. I don't know if not that one. Previous slide. Previous slide. Baka na jumpan eh. Previous slide, please. Okay, another slide. Another slide. Yeah, that one. Okay, that is for greenhouse gas mitigation. So greenhouse gas production could be divided into two parts. If you're operating, for example, an ICE, okay, you're burning fuel, and that is the amount of greenhouse gases released during the burning of fuel is counted under vehicle use. But the fuel that you use, before you can use that will be extracted and that will be produced. And that process also produces a lot of greenhouse gases. So that is quantified under fuel production. So if you add the two, you would see there that greenhouse gas of BEVs and PHEVs are a lot lower compared to ICEVs, especially in gasoline-dominated vehicles. For that difference for diesel-dominated vehicles are not that high because normally diesel engines are more efficient than gasoline
Bakit
engines.
sa battery, meron pa siyang fuel production?
Fuel
dapat zero
production.
na yan?
Fuel production of the coal, of the natural gas that you burn in the power plants.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, from the source.
Okay.
So it's a life
So
cycle
dapat
cost.
tanggalin na rin yung coal.
Yeah.
Diba?
Okay. So this one was based on the current grid of the Philippines, based on the generation mix. Okay, and based on a study in this is a global study actually in the Philippines, the impact of greenhouse gases is 17.1 US$ per ton of CO2 released. So the amount of greenhouse gases produced were monetized based on that factor. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Professor. Well, I'll go back to you later on for some questions, but we'll hear from DOE, since DOE will be the lead agency in implementing this law.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a prepared statement, but in the interest of time, of course, the Department of Energy really welcomes the initiatives towards this. But in terms of the incentives, I'd like to put on record that as a member of the Economic Development Cluster, the DOE would lean on the Department of Finance guidance on this particular matter. Later on, we did preliminarily submit some inputs regarding the measure earlier this morning. In light of the discussions that have transpired, we will be providing greater details with respect to that. We will provide you with some quantifications in terms of the greenhouse aspects. I think that's a portion wherein we would find common ground in supporting a passage of this particular measure. Also with respect to the transportation, we can confirm that indeed, in terms of the import bills of the country, the major driver, that's why we are still emitting of sorts, it's not actually coal from the power generation sector. It's predominantly oil used in the transport sector, wherein the good senator is correct in saying that close to 90% of our transportation sector is fueled by oil or petroleum-based products. And that we feel moving forward with the possible NDC for the Paris Accord is something that we will work hand in hand with the DOTR and DENR in addressing. The figures that I think Professor mentioned are correct with respect to the transportation side of the emissions. We were fortunate to have been privy to some of the work that he has done in the past. But we will be moving forward with some other suggestions. We'll just seek clearance from the Secretary on other interventions that we feel will be supportive of this particular sector moving forward. But to stress, of course, we support the direction. On a more technical side, Mr. Chair, members, I would like to highlight that this would be an opportunity for the sector, both the DOE, the ERC, and the other stakeholders in crystallizing our respective roles in ensuring the growth and development of the electric vehicle sector in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Patrick. Actually, that's one of the requests of the industry, is to crystallize or to define the roles of the different government agencies that will be involved in the development of this industry. I think in the last hearing, I heard from EVAP, no, which is the sole advocacy group when it comes to e-vehicles, that in their on-the-ground experience, different government agencies seem to be at a loss, no, in terms of many of the processes. No? For example, importation, documentation, registration in LTO. All of these different government agencies are, it seems to be, they're not talking, no? And the definition of the various terms are also not in harmony with one another. So the law seeks to clear all of this in terms of roles, in terms of the definitions, and in terms of processes. No? And we would like to really seek the advice of the Department of Energy, because we place the Department of Energy as the lead agency in promoting this industry. We feel that e-vehicles, at least for me, no, is an extension of the power sector, no? Being the power is the primary source of energy for this transportation. That's why we feel that DOE is the proper agency to spearhead this this industry. However, of course, maraming actors in this industry, no? And DOTR also is a very important actor in this industry. That's why DOTR also has a significant role in this bill. With that, Director, we also want to learn and quantify all of the benefits as well as probably the unintended consequences. No? For example, in the benefits, gaano ba kalaking o gaano kalaki marireduce natin yung ating oil importation, no? In terms of tonnage and in terms of value. The GHG emissions, of course, no? How much mapababa natin yung GHG emissions natin. And the other measures that we want to see, no, in terms of discussing this bill. So we want to quantify all of those. Of course, a lot of concepts na bababa yung pollution, bababa GHG emissions, but we need to quantify that, no? And we need your research team to crunch the numbers, no?
Yes, Mr. Senator, we will provide. In fact, we've done some preliminary numbers. We're just clearing it right now with the Secretary. But we have the estimation already in the terms of the greenhouse gas emissions. And at present, we're also working, preliminarily the numbers and the investments required. But we are working on the assumptions based on the things that we're doing, that there are no fiscal incentives. We're operating within the existing framework. How much will it cost? And what we're seeing is that the presentation the senator made earlier and our colleagues have been saying is that we're going to see a price competitiveness level approaching towards the middle of the 2020s, thereabouts. So just to keep an open mind also down the line, if there are targeted interventions, that might be the appropriate period that we have to align it with the cost competitiveness between the electric vehicles and the ICE vehicles moving forward.
Thank you, Director. Wala ho yung DOTR, so I think LTO will take the cudgels of DOTR. Any comments po?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm Attorney Clarence Quinto of LTO. LTO fully supports the passage of the law. In fact, the department, as a head start, there's an ongoing modernization program on the public utility vehicles, and we're very much focused on supporting the program of the DOTR on the modernization of the public utility vehicle. We are closely monitoring projects like pilot tests, like in Boracay. We have this e-jeep, e-trike. Mr. Chair, as of now, we have about 4,000 registered motor vehicle, electrified motor vehicle. But about 80% of these are e-trikes. About 20% are cars, utility vehicles, and about 5 trucks. And also buses. We have a few buses. The passage of the law would definitely be a big push to the program of the public utility vehicle modernization program. And yes, there are birth pains. This is a new industry. There are birth pains, especially the investor proponent in Bora, in Malay, Aklan, had some had experienced some birth pains, like getting permits from the LGU. They reported to us that they could not proceed because of some political issues, like the owner of the gasoline station there is a friend of the mayor, things like that. So, but I think they have overcome that challenges anymore already, Mr. Chair. Suffice it to say that with the department modernization program and with the passage of the law, we welcome this development, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Attorney, I know for a fact that one of the biggest endeavors of DOTR, LTO, and all the attached agency is the modernization program, and that calls for a complete change of the public utility vehicles, especially the jeeps in our country. How can this bill help that modernization program? We mentioned it in the bill, but we didn't prescribe any time frame, any ratio. But paano ho makakatulong tong bill in that modernization program? I do agree, no? In light of, I've seen kanina yung pictures natin, marami talaga mga POVs na luma na kaya mausok. So the strategy here is to transition them into a cleaner mode of transportation. So how do you envision this bill to support that?
Challenge for the department, especially.
A challenge, as I understand, the cost is also quite hefty, no?
Yeah.
Compared to magkano po ang ordinaryong jeep?
Yeah,
Ordinaryong jeep. Pag bibili ka ng jeep bukas, magkano ho yun? Yung ordinaryo. PUJ. More or less lang.
Yeah, about 600,000.
600,000. Magkano po ang e-vehicle, ang e-jeep? 1.5. No? More or less, mga 1.5. So, doon pa lang 3 times na no? And that's where the economics, the complication in economics come in. So, ano po, how do you envision that? No?
Yeah, it's really very challenging, Mr. Chair, talking about economics. Also, we're facing a lot of challenges before these transport groups. The phase out, there were some issuances that we have to phase out 15 years and above old vehicles, but we cannot implement that. There were a lot of suspension of that. So perhaps with the passage of the law, it will be more easier on the part of the duty holders, the government to
Pero
push
baka
through it.
sa akin naman magalit yung mga yon. Kayo talaga ayaw nyo sa inyo, sa akin naman
We'll,
magagalit.
we'll find a way. We'll find a way to really come up with a win-win situation, Mr. Chair, on how we can really push through with the modernization without so much cost or damage on the part of the transport sector. The Land Bank is also on the forefront of this program. So with other sectors of government.
I think conceptually we all agree that e-vehicles is the way, no, to clean up the air quality on their streets, no. But yung pinaka-basic dun yung affordability ng sasakyan, no. And I just want to tie that up with what we are discussing right now, no, the development of vehicles industry, and what do you want to see in the
Well,
bill to support that concept, no? Take into consideration the affordability of the e-vehicles. So, ano ba yung mga suggestion nyo para
Well,
mapasok natin?
Our mandate really is road safety. And one of the factors that we are looking into is the roadworthiness of the vehicles. And with the introduction of this EGP, I think that would definitely enhance our effort towards road safety. We partner with some groups like Imagine Law, and they reported to us in the Philippines there are 33 deaths a day because of road crash incidents. So that's why, and most of this, the major cause of these road crash incidents are not roadworthy vehicles. And with the introduction of the new vehicles and the phasing out of the old ones, perhaps that would definitely reduce number of road crash incidents in the Philippines.
All right, Attorney, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We'd like to also hear from DOST. Any comments po, sir?
Good morning, Your Honor. DOST has been supporting transportation and the Bureau of Product Test Standards in terms of provision of testing services, the CARS program, and also we've been, for the last 6 years, we had some research and development projects related to mass transportation. We have developed the road train, the electric, hybrid electric trains that the Philippine National Railways is using in its Alabang to Calamba route, and AGT, the Automated Guideway Transit. So DOST can give support in terms of research and development and the provision of testing services. But Your Honor, reading through the Senate bill, the good senator has introduced, wala pong nakalagay na role ng DOST dito.
We're thinking of expanding the bill, not only promoting e-vehicles and charging station, but the whole industry.
Yes.
And part of the recommendation ng EVAP is R&D, which I agree. No, this will give rise to a whole new, different industry in the Philippines, and we need R&D to further enhance our own government's knowledge and also the knowledge of our workforce. No, dahil bagong industry ito, and that's why one of the recommendation ng EVAP to put a provision on R&D in which the OST will play a very significant role.
Yes, Your Honor. I agree with you.
Kung mag-alala, may trabaho ho kayo. So,
Thank you pa.
MMDA, sir?
Good morning, Your Honor. Of course, MMDA fully support the proposed bills that encourage sustainable transportation, such as the development of electric vehicle technology. But in order for these initiatives to have a greater impact, the agency would like to see more legislations that are geared towards greener sources of power to lessen the country's dependence on fossil fuels to meet our energy and transportation fuel requirements. Also, the agency would like to recommend other incentives to make use of electrics or hybrid vehicles more attractive as the bill progresses. We would like, of course, we support the proposed incentive to have the e-vehicles that are utilized for public transportation be exempted from number coding or the coding scheme. However, we have reservations on any initiatives regarding on-streets parking since, as a general rule, the agency discourages the utilization of roads as parking spaces, as this will aggravate the traffic congestion problem that we are now experiencing, especially in Metro Manila. Also, for initial implementation, we can mandate certain government agencies to pilot test the use of e-vehicles and install charging stations in its properties, such as in regional government centers, government complex, and wide area academic institution within Metro Manila or NCR. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Asek. I do agree with you that the exemption of on-street parking should be removed, no? Ako nga ho nag-author yung no garage, no parking, tapos staff ko ho naglagay ito, hindi ako naglagay. But yung sa exemption of sa mandatory unified vehicular volume reduction, are you in favor of this?
With vehicles utilized for public transport, but not all vehicles.
For private, because it sends us wrong signal to the public that people can be exempted while others suffer from extreme traffic conditions. No? So
Well, if we are asking for incentives for them to utilize this vehicle for public transport, we can initially...
For public, you mean for public transport?
For public
Okay.
transport only,
Okay.
Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Raymond of Isakay, any comments? You've been a trailblazer in this e-vehicle space, and would like to hear your thoughts on how to develop the industry. We're now moving from just the vehicle charging station. We want to promote the entire industry because we see a lot of benefit for the country as a whole if we promote the industry, especially in creating jobs. No?
Yeah. Well, good morning, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to be part of the hearing. As we mentioned last March, I think in the last hearing, the bill is very important and we're truly supportive of it in the sense that we believe it really unlocks some of the demand side constraints. I think everything before this bill has been really focused on supply side constraints, such as the inclusion in the IPP and all the other policies. I think I'd like to underscore the need to spur consumer demand by at least trying to approximate or at least level the playing field among ICE vehicles and electrified vehicles or electric vehicles. As Professor Biona said, even if we remove, or as you, Mr. Senator, said, even if we remove all of these taxes, we still, don't get to parity, and we only really get to parity from an acquisition cost standpoint in the mid-2020s. But I think the relevant metric today will not necessarily be just acquisition cost, but life cycle cost or total cost of ownership. There are significant benefits to electric vehicles from a total cost of ownership standpoint, particularly from a cost per kilometer basis as well as from a maintenance standpoint. And I think a good example of this kind of dovetailing from the discussion on the PUV modernization program is looking at electric Jeeps versus the alternative that the PUV MP prescribes, which are Euro 4 Jeeps. You mentioned earlier that a normal Jeep would cost less than $1 million, and an electric Jeep would, approximate about 1.5 to 2 million pesos. If you compare that to a Euro 4 Jeep, the comparison becomes a little bit better for electric Jeeps. It's still more expensive, but the delta becomes a lot less, and that is more than made up for by the improvement in running costs or operating costs. And that is why we, in the industry, particularly in Isakay, have really invested on these electric Jeep routes. We see that it's actually beneficial to operators, and we intend to encourage other operators to follow suit. Again, our business model is not necessarily to become an operator. The only reason we operate the Makati-Mandaluyong route is to serve as a showcase, to prove to other operators that it actually works, and it's actually beneficial to them not only from a health standpoint, but from a livelihood standpoint. And we operate on full cost. We operate electric vehicles. We've bought the electric vehicles. We pay our drivers salaries, and they don't operate on a boundary system, and it's actually better for everybody. So if people can recognize this reality, I think more electric vehicles, particularly electric Jeeps, will be adopted. I guess another point that I'd like to make is in relation to other aspects of the bill, which is the charging stations. I really am a believer that this industry is a vehicles-back spurred industry, not a charging station forward. Just because there are charging stations out there doesn't mean that electric vehicles will suddenly pop up. I think it really starts with the electric vehicles, and then the charging stations will definitely be there to support it. As a case in point, if you look at charging behavior in other countries, 90% of charging actually happens in the home. The 10% happens outside only in emergency situations, only as a backup kind of a scenario. And so I think those charging facilities at home are already in place to support electric vehicles, especially as ranges become more extensive. I think we're seeing ranges in the order of about 150 kilometers and up, which means if you charge your car overnight, you're good to go for a few days at least, depending on where you travel. Last point, Mr. Chair, I think you mentioned one question which would improve further the adoption of electric vehicles from a DOTR standpoint. You mentioned in your bill the assignment of green routes. I think that would be very, very important. I think that's a new feature of the bill that, again, very happy about. So I think
Raymond, I understand that you now operate in Makati.
Makati and Mandaluyong.
And Mandaluyong. How do you scale this up? In your expert opinion, how do you scale this up nationwide? I think you've learned a lot.
Yes,
The positive sides and all the mistakes.
Yes.
And how do you scale this up, and how do you incorporate those concepts here in the bill, so that moving forward, the bill can serve as a framework for other operators to enter into other jurisdictions?
Well, as I mentioned, Mr. Chair, the reason we did it is to learn ourselves. Para pag kinausap namin yung mga ibang operators, we can answer their questions. Lahat ng mga agam-agam nila, ma-address namin. And I think in the last year or so, we've gotten very smart about the process. I think one thing that is necessary in order to scale this is really to improve the financing package in order to allow jeepney operators and drivers to be able to manage the initial upfront cost. And I think the policy is in place. The PUV, part of the PUV modernization program is the Pasada Loan Program, which is being administered by the Land Bank of the Philippines and the Development Bank of the Philippines. And the policy there is 5, 6, 7, 8, as many of you know. 5% equity, 6% interest, 7 years to pay, and an 80,000 peso subsidy. It's really good. I think the problem begins when operators apply for this loan program. It's a very tedious and cumbersome process that in a way turns them off. In some cases, it takes about a year to disburse these loans. And pagka ganun katagal, talagang it will dissuade a lot of these operators from from taking on the program. So I think that one, if we can unlock that, I think that should spur a lot of adoption and really help us get to scale. But on our part, we're doing everything we can. We're talking to operators, speaking to them about our experience. We're trying to enable them, trying to, in some cases, even advise them on how to best package their applications to the DBP and the land bank. And some people are signing up. And I think it's only going to get better as we go forward. We just need maybe a few to really adopt, and then hopefully it will really snowball.
Thank you, Raymond. I'll have some questions, but I'll ask it later on. DTI, any comments, engineer?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. The Department of Trade and Industry, particularly the Bureau of Philippine Standards, we support the objectives of the Senate Bill for Electric Vehicle. It's very timely and relevant. It will address some sustainable development goals that we have identified: the no poverty, the good health and well-being, affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and climate change. As mentioned earlier, we have a technical committee in charge for the development and adoptions of international standards. It is the Technical Committee 44 and Subcommittee 1. Some of the technical committee members are here in the room. Our chairman is Mr. Edmund Araga. Thank you very much, sir, for supporting the standardization activities of the Bureau of Philippine Standards. We have several promulgated standards aligned to international standards, and our standards are developed related to e-vehicles are also in accordance with the advocacy of the ASEAN. Our standards are also aligned with the regional standards of the ASEAN. However, these are all voluntary, sir. And we hope that after the passage of the bill into law, the implementing agency, particularly the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation, will consider the standards to become mandatory, because we believe that if these standards will be implemented, the manufacturing sectors will be globally competitive to address the needs of the domestic market and the international market, sir. Thank you very much.
Engineer, ano tong mga standards that you mentioned?
Sir, these are all related for the e-vehicles.
Like
For
such as-
example, the safety requirements. We have also the charging protocol. I hope that the charging protocol will be considered by the Department of Energy in deciding what protocol to be implemented in
But
the
you want that
Philippines.
in the law or just to
in the
delegate?
implementing rules and
Implementing na
regulations,
lang.
sir. Yes, opo.
Yeah, we'll pinpoint who will prescribe the standards, and in the implementing rules, doon na lang ilalagay.
Yes, sir,
Because
opo.
the technology is evolving. I read the position paper of EVAP that until now, there's a tug of war as to what standards should be used for e-vehicles, and it's constantly evolving. No?
Yes, Mr. Chair, because the standards are also dynamic to address the technology innovation and modernization aspects soon. So we hope that our standard will not be will be used in the implementations of the law, sir.
So just to ask, what are those standards, or at least the category of those standards that we need to identify in the law? Like for example, the charging protocols, I guess batteries, no? Those type of things, para ma-identify na natin dito. We will not prescribe the exact standard, but at least the categories for those standards. No?
Yes, sir. I believe that we have submitted the list of the standards last March, but we will update the Senate on the newly adopted international standards po.
Thank you, thank you. And also from DTI and BOI, would like to get a very detailed study and to quantify all of those things that you mentioned in the SDG. We said that the industry, the promotion of the industry will, in effect, have positive results in the SDGs. But we need to quantify those, no? Because these are all concepts, for example, in health, in poverty reduction, sana ma-quantify natin ho yun so that we can educate the public that the promotion of the industry is also affecting positively the different components of SDGs. No? But we need to quantify all of those. We need that from you so that during the presentation in the plenary, I can present that clearly to the other members of the Senate. All right, so thank you. PCC, any comments po?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, Mr. Chair, thank you for inviting the Philippine Competition Commission, and thank you for considering our previous comments on Senate Bill 2137. And most of that comments were reflected in Senate Bill 174. So thank you for that, Mr. Chair. And we will continue to support this bill, Mr. Chair. And we would like to submit additional inputs, Mr. Chair, based on our initial review of Senate Bill 174, if I may introduce them, Mr. Chair. So first of all, on the grant of fiscal incentives on e-vehicles, we note that Section 17 already provides sufficient safeguards with regards to the technical requirements or technical compliance in order to have that incentive, to qualify for the incentives. And we would like to add another form of safeguard, Mr. Chair, to impose transparency obligations to agencies that will provide incentives. And this should be made available to the public on a regular basis. And maybe, Mr. Chair, to explicitly provide a provision that these incentives should be on e-vehicles only, because we note that there could be manufacturers that may be involved in the production of both conventional vehicles and e-vehicles, and we don't want that these incentives will be abused in the future, because this could be a spill over to that to motor parts of conventional vehicles. So we actually proposed a provision, Mr. Chairman, if I may read, that the BOI and other appropriate government agencies are tasked to put in place a mechanism that would ensure that the fiscal incentives accorded under this section are solely used for the promotion and use of e-vehicles. Another input, Mr. Chair, is on the mandatory parking slots. We note that because in section 11, it provides that the parking lots should be within the building, but we note that parking lots are not necessarily available within the building, but in the adjacent lot or open parking. So we would like to improve the provision under section 11 on page 8, lines 5 to 7, that would state that the number of dedicated parking slots shall be proportional to the total number of parking slots within the building or establishment, and we would like to add including all of its parking facilities, to include the open parking, Mr. Chair. Also on the charging station requirement in buildings and gasoline station, we also note that buildings varies in size or floor areas, including the capacity of building owners to comply with this requirement, Mr. Chair. So we are proposing to have a mechanism also to categorize the buildings, including the gasoline stations, because the gasoline stations have different sizes also and different income generation. So if you can categorize these buildings in establishment and propose a certain level of compliance, for example, level 1, maybe one charging station, or depending on the speed of charging, Mr. Chair, if you can have that option for for the building owners in gasoline stations. And we also have a concern on possible incompatibility of charging stations, Mr. Chair. As vanguard of competition, Mr. Chair, we would like to propose that the technology that may be adopted, or this charging station should cater to different kinds of e-vehicles, motor vehicles, no? Different technology or brand. So it should adopt a technology neutral, Mr. Chair. And lastly, Mr. Chair, on the public access to information, the provision on under Section 20 provides that the disclosure of the components of the distribution units rates imposed on charging station. This may possibly result in anti-competitive behavior, Mr. Chair, such as price signaling, because easy access to pricing data could allow or may allow collusion on price setting. So in this regard, Mr. Chair, we would like to inquire the extent on the kind of information or the extent of information that may be disclosed in this section, Mr. Chair. So that's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And congratulations for your MOA with ERC.
Yeah, thank you.
Sa wakas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, because you're the one that shepherded that in this, in this hearing.
At least we'll be we can sleep soundly at night knowingly that collusion will be monitored closely by the expert in competition. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, both actually with DOE and ERC.
And and DOE pala, no? It's a tripartite
MOA, Mr. Chair.
It's a tripartite MOA, no, between
Yes,
DOE, PCC, and ERC. Right.
Yes,
Congratulations to the
Thank
three
you,
of
Mr.
you. Meralco, any comments po?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Allow me to share Meralco's position on Senate Bill number 174. Meralco supports the passage of Senate Bill number 174, and upon its promulgation, we will submit our Charging Infrastructure Development Plan, or CIDP, in accordance with the EV roadmap that will be prepared by the DOE together with the DOTR and in coordination with the DTI. We thank the committee for addressing the policy gap which we pointed out in the previous bill, wherein the DUs were required to submit the CIDP while the third-party service providers were not. So in the new bill, the third-party service providers are now required to submit a rollout plan to the DOE. Currently, as mentioned during the hearing last March 18th, to ensure grid readiness for electric vehicle charging, Meralco conducts research and development and testing on EV charging technologies to gain first-hand knowledge. In fact, just recently we tested the first vehicle-to-grid facility in our compound, and we were able to draw power from a Mitsubishi Outlander, and it powered the Meralco Power Lab. So we think that this will basically allow for the better total cost of ownership for electric vehicle owners once this technology is basically more propagated. As a good corporate citizen in DU, we upgrade our distribution network to support efficient, safe, and reliable accommodation of loads from electric vehicle charging stations. Relative to the different kinds of charging stations, we observe that many existing commercial EV users use AC-based charging stations. But with the entry of new EVs with higher battery capacity, the need for DC fast charging becomes more important. For DC fast charging, the demand of the grid can be counted in the tens of the hundreds of kilowatts already, and the vehicles can be charged in less than an hour. The DC fast charging stations will have a correspondingly significant impact on the power quality of the grid. Thus, their deployment needs to be well planned and coordinated with the local distribution utility, the transmission network provider, and as well with the DOE. Once again, we generally support the measure, and we will work with Congress and other stakeholders in preparing a reliable and efficient charging infrastructure for the wider adoption of electric vehicles in our franchise and also in the country. Thank you.
Meron kayong do you have any simulation regarding let's say, the different pace of adoption of e-vehicles, and also the technology that can be used in terms of charging stations. My point of matter is, for example, we are going to promote this, no? And in the best case scenario, adoption is very quick. And the demand for fast charging, as you mentioned, will also be very high. What type of investments will the distribution utility, in this case Meralco, will have to make in order to keep up with the fast-paced adoption of e-vehicles? Do you have that type of simulation?
No simulation on that level, sir. But as mentioned by Mr. Ravello, we foresee that majority again of the charging would be done mostly in the homes. Especially when we're seeing that more vehicles really have higher capacity ranges already. The need for DC fast charging station would really mostly answer range anxiety for a number of users. Given that, as the DU, we're going to prepare a development plan to basically put up charging facilities in our properties, and we will be supporting those that will be putting up third-party charging stations in their own premises.
Gusto ko lang malaman is based on because the law is now going to mandate all buildings to have charging stations, no? Because that's what Raymond said, no? 90% of the charging happens in your condominiums, in your homes. So for people who live in condominiums, they would like to see mandatory charging stations so they can charge, no? If this law becomes a reality and we will now push mandatory installation of charging station in all the facilities, there'll be a uptake of charging stations all over the country, no? I just want to understand lang, what type of technology do we need? What type of upgrade do we need? Is the grid and also the distribution utility ready for this type of uptake? And kung ready na, then well and good. Kung hindi, what type of investments do we need? And those investments will also impact the rates that ERC will have to pass on to the consumer. So I want to understand that dynamic because in the best case scenario nga, the acceptability will be high. Everyone will comply with the law, and you will see now a lot of people putting up their own charging stations, and the developers will put up their own charging stations. So that will impact the quality of electricity and also the distribution utilities operation. So I want to understand that. Meron ba tayong simulation doon?
We'll submit the simulation to you, Chairman. But on the end of what is really required as a charging station provider, no, where there is a need for additional investments is when there are the DC fast charging stations. Usually, the DC fast chargers require a three-phase transformer that is usually 400 volts, and that is not prevalent all over the franchise area. No, usually it is in commercial areas where those are installed in support of the buildings and of the needs of malls and other facilities. No, in that case, where we have installed such facilities, no, we have installed the transformers together with our partner institution, no, who have put up those charging facilities. So yes, that is going to be a very, very basic requirement, but that is something that we will also submit to you in our simulation.
Simulate lang, no? And for example, let's come up with different scenarios, and what type of investment do we need to achieve that scenario, and what is the rate impact at the end? Because we also had to understand the rate. These are the, I guess, the unintended consequences of adopting EVs, no? Because we might see some rate increases because of the investments that utilities need to make, as well as the grid operator needs to make. So we need to understand that side also, no? And pakisubmit na lang sa amin. All right. ERC, any comments?
Good morning, Mrs. Chair. Good morning, everyone. On the part of the ERC, the Energy Regulatory Commission, we would like again to express our support to this legislative measure to facilitate the promotion, delivery, and adaptation of electric vehicles in the country, which will ultimately enhance energy independence and promote environmentally clean and ecologically safe energy sources. A successful deployment of battery electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, as well as establishment of electric charging station in the Philippines, requires the resolution of many complex and overlapping issues, especially in the regulation aspect. During the previous hearing, Mr. Chair, last March 18, 2019, I've made a manifestation regarding dependency of a distribution energy resources rules, which essentially covers the licensing part of the charging stations, particularly those with self-generating facilities. However, prior to the presentation of the said DER rules before the Commission, the Marketing Operations Service, or the MOS of the Energy Regulatory Commission, which is initially in charge of the drafting thereof, received several directives from the Commission in relation to the said DER rules. Among these directives are the following: establishment of a solid framework for the DER. Now, the DER ultimately does not cover only the licensing part, but also involves or includes the regulatory aspect as well as several standards to be incorporated. Also, incorporation of if possible, of some models and frameworks from other countries, which is also the directive of this Committee on Energy during the previous hearing. As a result of those directives, Mr. Chair, the said rule is still on the drafting stage, and a task force is about to be created as well. However, considering that this rule is part or on the priority list of the Commission, hopefully we could come up with these uniform and streamlined rules, requirements, and standards before the year ends. Having said that, Mr. Chair, may we also propose some recommendations and seek clarifications on the following issues and items. Number one, in relation to Section 2C, the charging fee, we propose that the said legislation should take into consideration the necessity to further regulate the associated fees, such as the administration costs or fees and the service fees to be imposed on electric vehicle users for the use of facilities of public charging stations to promote better transparency and reasonable pricing, which is a common clamor by the general public. Second, the proposed legislation should clearly define the boundary of distribution utilities intending to engage in the business of charging station charging station service provider to avoid mitigating circumstances in the determination of the regulatory asset base of distribution utilities. And lastly, we would also seek clarification as to the kind of application being filed by this charging station with self-generating facilities before the IRC. We would like to seek clarification whether the same is for purposes of licensing. By that, we will evaluate the technical and financial aspect of the said charging station, or for purposes of registration or permit, issuance of permit only. That would be all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney. In our concept, no, and this is actually patterned in other jurisdictions, that the rates that will be regulated is from the DU to the charging station, no? But the charging station to the consumer will be deregulated, no? And the reason for that is ang daming charging stations. There'll be charging stations all over the country, and we cannot, hindi naman pwedeng each charging station mag-a-apply ng rates, no? So the concept here is the DU to the charging station, and that they will have to apply for the rates that they will be charging this charging station. No, any concept regarding that concept? Any opinion regarding that concept?
So that would mean, by saying that, Mr. Chair, the charging fee as expressly defined under Section 2C would refer only to the DU, from the DU down to the charging stations, and not the charging stations to the electric vehicles. Noted, Mr. Chair.
But what's your opinion on that concept?
Actually, we we do not we support the objective of the bill not to regulate the charging station, the rates from the charging station down to the electric vehicles. We do not we have no objection to that, Mr. Chair.
You mentioned earlier that we have to include the other fees, no?
Yes, for
As
purposes
associated
of
fees.
permit fees, we should expressly clarify the associated fees. So
This is with the charging station. This is with DU to the charging stations, no?
yes, Mr. Chair, for purposes of unbundling, so we have to clarify the rate as to the administration cost or administration fee as well as the service fee.
Ng DU. So ang DU mag-a-apply sa inyo ng rates to be charged to the charging stations, eh. And normally that's only one rate, no? So any comment, Director?
Mr. Chair, I think we're having this discussion. There's a live case in terms of the petroleum side of things. The way we have done in the past 3 decades in the energy sectors, that we've liberalized it. In terms of end users, I think the direction that was taken in the bill is that the charges would be between what, as you've been explaining. Now, what we've seen, if you really want to see an uptake, now I'm preempting a formal position on this, what we've seen in other jurisdictions, let's say in China and in Thailand, what they've done is that the government has taken an active role in providing for the charging infrastructures and setting a fixed discounted rate on the charging. There's a lot of levers that we can be using to promote this particular industry. That's why in a side agreement, a side discussion with the DOF earlier, we were mentioning that we will explore all of those and we will be making those formal representations. But for us to have a competitive sector, the rates have to be dictated by the prevailing requirements in this particular sector. In the similar vein that we've seen it in the power sector, in the downstream oil sector, I think that example should be reflected in any legislation coming for this particular electric vehicle or, you know. So in bottom line, Mr. Chair, we'd like to see it deregulated, especially at the level of the consumers. And then to answer the technical considerations, in terms of the charging that was raised by the colleague from PCC, most of the loads that you're seeing, if it's going to be in parking establishments and what have you, these buildings or facilities already have robust technical electrical requirements precisely because of the nature of the system. But what we're missing out here, and maybe later on the technical guys can provide, is that what the international experience is that once a vehicle is parked, an electric vehicle is parked, it predominantly doesn't charge. It actually feeds into the grid. It actually supports the grid. That's why in that respect, I'm just bringing it in. I didn't want to bring it in, but the work that both the ERC and DOE are doing in terms of the smart grid also comes into play. I'm not so technical about this. Maybe in a more technical working group level, Mr. Chair and the other members here, we can sit down and discuss this because it's a very technical discussion. But at the end of the day, right now, what we're seeing is that if the vehicles are parked, the international experience is that they're not really charging most of the time. They're predominantly supporting and actually providing support to the grid or the distribution system.
I would suppose that's that will be sort of like para siyang net metering.
That's right, Mr. Chair. That's why we would want discussions at that technical level proceed, and then so we can derivate it in a committee to be more digestible instead of going through this discussion at this point, if with your indulgence, Mr. Chair.
All right. We'll wait for that technical report. Any more comments from ERC?
That would be all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sa Transco, any comments? Meron kayong...
Mr. Chair, Transco fully support the bill. We have a minor comment on the bill. especially on section 6, letter B, which state that the insured charging station are compliant with the PEC, PDC, and PGC and other relevant laws. The Philippine Grid Code is the basic rules and a requirement and procedure and standard that govern the operation and maintenance and development of a high voltage backbone of the transmission system. Since the charging station is not directly connected to the grid or the transmission system, we think that the PGC must not, the charging station must not comply with the Philippine Grid Code. Since the charging station is only connected to the low voltage, and the Philippine Grid Code is primarily a requirement and standard for the high voltage system. So we think that it is not included in the Philippine Grid Code for the charging station. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll take note of that po. NPC, may comment?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. NPC supports the passage of this bill, sir. NPC's mandate is to provide power generation in the missionary areas. So what we can do to support this bill is to provide the capacity additions in preparation for this bill. So for those who do not know the missionary area, it is the areas that are not connected in the main grid, and that those are the islets. So I propose, sir, to include also the missionary electrification plan of NPC, which is the 5-year plan in the missionary areas, and it is submitted to the DOE and included in the Philippine Energy Plan po. Thank you.
Thank you. Going back to ERC, attorney, I understand that ERC now is in the midst of drafting a charging station rules. Tama po ba?
It's a DER rule, which
rule.
already incorporates the charging station with self-generating facilities, Mr. Chair.
When is this going to come out?
Hopefully before the year ends, Mr. Chair.
Can we just, since that is a broader circular, no, or broader document because it incorporates DER, may I request from the Commission to focus on the charging stations, because that's a topic at hand right now. And if we will, if we can get your opinion and also your suggestions on the charging stations, anything that concerns the charging station, so we can incorporate that here in this bill. We don't want a scenario wherein we will come up with a bill and the rules will be different from the bill. No? So this early on, we want to harmonize what the Commission is thinking in regards to the charging station, and also what we are going to include in this bill.
Noted, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Attorney. Ernie, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for inviting MAP to attend. Firstly, Mr. Chair, we fully support the implementation of Senate Bill 174, primarily because it is, again, pro-environment and would really help solve the problem of pollution, particularly since the biggest source of pollution right now are really the transport sector, no? And also, in effect, lessen our dependence on imported fuel. However, I hope you will bear with us, Mr. Chair. As business sector, we are guided by the principles of simplification, try to minimize barriers to entry, and importantly, the ease of doing business. And in this regard, we would like to really cut down on the regulatory requirements, which I hope you understand, Mr. Chair. The important thing we think as far as the electric vehicle industry is concerned is really to develop the market. It's the same thing as when we were trying to develop the natural gas vehicles. You have to develop the market first. And in order to develop the market, what's very important is to make EV more affordable. Admittedly, different categories. You have the hybrids and the pure EVs. But let's look at the pure EVs as a particular example. The ones that will spearhead, I think, personally, the development of EVs are really the consumers, the middle class, the ones who can afford to purchase vehicles and so forth, so on, because this will be cheaper than buying gasoline, as an example, which I think your bill has very amply stated. It's cheaper to run on EV rather than on fossil fuel. So the variable cost from the power industry point of view, there's nothing to discuss. It's really the capital expenditure cost. And what's important here, and I guess, well, Yusek Gabin will always disagree with the business sector, is that, we should, in order to promote the growth of demand, you need to lower the price, and one of the big issues are really taxes. I know, I mean, we don't go into that anymore. We've got to that discussion before. But I understand really from Professor Biona that on our side discussion that, like if you were to cut down the taxes, all taxes on electric vehicle, particularly on the pure electric vehicle, you could drop the cost by as much as 40%. So that's already a big plus in trying to convince the consumer to shift to an EV. No? So the important thing is to make it affordable, and taxes, VAT, etc. I think if we want to encourage, should be considered deleted or at least for a certain period of time. No? The market we think will develop, but just how big the market will be is really dependent upon the affordability. No? And part of the affordability, and we all know this for a fact, is that anybody who buys a vehicle right now has financing. And therefore, the financing aspect is the one that must be tackled also. And examples of these are like rediscounting windows that can be offered by DBP or Land Bank to banks in order to, let's say, the DBP or Land Bank lends to BDO or BPI at 4% or 3%, and then they can re-lend this on a retail level for electric vehicles at a lower rate than their normal standard refinancing rate. The other incentive that could be done is really to make financing of electric vehicles part of the qualifications of the requirements of central bank. As an example, now there's central bank requirement that banks should lend to agri. But we all know the lending to agri has never taken off because of the creditworthiness issues. No? But if financing an EV can lead to part of the requirements to meet the agri loans or any environmental, is something, I know, Patrick, but the important thing is, the principle is there, that you make it eligible in order to encourage banks to lend. No? And on the charging stations, Mr. Chair, there's a lot of requirements just to put up a charging station. I think as Mr. Ravelo had already indicated earlier, and this has been as a result of experiences abroad, no? The charging is mostly done in the house or in the office. I mean, the point really here is, ideally, it should be at the house, and therefore maybe a discounted, I guess Director Patrick was already saying that maybe discounted rate for kilowatt hours that are used for charging electric vehicle can somehow be introduced, no? Or in the offices. As far as the infrastructure is concerned, there's nothing really complicated about it, no? I mean, three-phase is always a requirement for commercial establishments, no? And therefore, even office buildings have three-phase power. So putting a charging station is just a question of putting an outlet with an AC-DC conversion so employees can charge their car. So there is really no need for special, we think, regulation as far as charging stations are concerned. We should also look that, gasoline stations can be a source of, and parking lots of malls, can be used as charging stations. However, for, let's say, like gasoline stations, I mean, it takes, I don't know, what's the quickest, half an hour or 15 minutes to charge an electric vehicle. You don't expect a car to wait 15 minutes just while it's charging. You'll have a whole line in the gasoline station. No? So the most convenient way of in-out is really through parking lots and offices or homes. I guess with that, just a side note, I'm glad Director Patrick brought it out. In more advanced countries, the more introduction of electric vehicles, and if they are a significant portion of demand, it actually stabilizes the power because they're connected online. So during peak, when there's a shortage, instead of running the ILP, you could just draw power from the vehicle that's connected. And if you draw the power, and then during the time when off-peak, or the peak has passed, then the vehicle is automatically charged by the grid. In that regard, Mr. Chair, please, I'll just say, don't get involved with net metering, because up to now, we still have major issues with respect to the implementation of net metering. And if you're going to do this for electric vehicles, it's just going to complicate the rollout of this plan. But I guess in summary, Mr. Chair, I hope you don't mind our being blunt about it. The important thing is to simplify the introduction, and the important thing is to develop the demand. And one way of this is to make the electric vehicles more affordable, making them at par with, let's say, a small vehicle, a typical family uses, 1.2, 1.4 million, or even a million, would be something that will help spearhead the development of this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ernie. And that's really the intention, to simplify a lot of the processes, especially applications to the government. I know for a fact that that is one of the biggest barriers that any entrepreneur encounters when they deal with government. So as much as possible, we want to reduce the applications and documentary requirements to enter into the electric vehicle space. Lastly, Nea, any comments po sa Nea?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The NEA fully supports the passage of the bill. It shall comply with the requirements of the law, as well as shall ensure that the 121 electric cooperatives shall comply with the requirements. Also, sir, considering that the charging stations will be an additional electricity demand for the in the franchise areas of the electric cooperatives, the National Electrification Administration sees the bill as an opportunity to promote clean, reliable, and sustainable renewable energy. As public and private facilities will be required to establish their own charging stations, renewable energy technologies such as solar and wind will be a good option to provide power for the charging stations. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. EVAP, any additional comments? I think what I really need from EVAP and also from DTI and BOI is the issue of pricing. No? And this has been constantly mentioned earlier. Ernie reinforced it again, no? Because that's how we will penetrate the market as quick as possible. And this is both for consumer vehicles and also public utility vehicles. These are very distinct markets, but the objectives are the same, the adoption of this type of technology. And we need to understand the pricing for both consumer vehicles and public utility vehicles, and how taxation can affect and make it competitive. No? I think Dr. Biona has extensive studies on that, but I would like to get your official because BOI is the promotion agency and also from the advocacy group.
Sir, Mr. Chair, it's like this, no? Half of the cost of the unit is based on the cost of the batteries. That's why we are pitching on developing a battery supplier aside from monopolized supplier here in the Philippines, which are into lead acid. Most of the units that are now being used are into lithium. Now, we are very open to that, we're trying to connect with other source like from CIAPS PBA in China and counteracting with the PNIA, Philippine Nickel Industrial Association, wherein they have to have a collaboration in order for them to produce a battery supply and have a source here. And initially, part of the MBDP and EO 262 before, when you fabricate and assemble the units, the cost of the battery is not yet included based on what we submitted before. And we were, there were about only 5 or 6 members of ours who availed of this MBDP and EO 262. Now we are limited on that aspect simply because ITH is only apply for acquisition of acquisition of the machines that you're going to make use of. But if you're going to an MBDP, that would make you a bigger capitalization of ranging from $2 million for you to avail of this program. Now, most of the members of ours are still on the small and medium enterprise, and they are not capable of producing bunch of capitalization. So that's where we have a hurdle. And then what we did was, some of our members, they are the ones who produce the setup para may proof of concept, meaning they are the ones who provide the infrastructure, even the charging station, para ma-address yung range anxiety on that. Para lang makita na nila the whole infrastructure itself. But now it's nagle-level up na. Most are into it because na-support ng PUB modernization program. In fact, isa lang doon sa yung 4,000 natin, 3,000 of which is on the BMAC side lang. Meaning to say, the supplier from BMAC who availed for the ADB project is part of it. That is registered under LTO. And the rest, the 1,000 plus, is nandun na doon sa mga bumili na mga fleet operators to or individuals. Like for the resorts, limited on the premises. So, hirap pa rin kami doon sa addressing concerns on that. But, we consider it a sunrise industry because we now felt the support of the government. We now felt what we have to add up on every agency. We volunteer on BPS DTI to be part of the SC 21 Working Group 1 and 2 for the technical committee. And we also work with DOTR. Like yesterday, we talked with UNDP, United Nations Development Program, wherein most of the agencies concerned are part of it, and EVAP is also included para mabuo na yung talagang infrastructure. Now, all these para ma-cost down natin yung units per se for an individual user. Yun yung ina-address namin. Pero kailangan talagang we have to come up with a step-by-step and ladderalized form. And your bill will really make the difference on having this established one. At least most of the investors who are really into it will have na-feel nila na very supported na ang government and into the EV industry.
Thank you, Edmond. And well, admittedly, this bill is a work in progress. And from the first time we had the hearing, we incorporated a lot of your comments. But after the 7th EV summit that you hosted, we also picked up a lot of comments and suggestions that we want to incorporate in the bill. Yung 7th na EV summit is an eye-opener for me because we were looking at mostly public utility vehicles, no, in that event. No? Hopefully, yung 8th, 9th, 10th summit, may mga private at consumer vehicles na tayo. No? Hopefully. No?
May I add? Actually, I appreciate the big boys joining in our summit. The big manufacturers of the car industry, Nissan, Mitsubishi, and actually BYD is here, and Dongfeng of Hyundai. They are here kasi nakita na nila na acceptability of the market is at 46%. And even on the motorcycle side, Kimco is here already. Now, the only thing that makes them to push forward on that launching of their units is additional regulations and some legislative laws that would support the industry. So, sir, actually, we are very, we appreciate your existence on the 7th EV Summit and your support. And also, we also work with the 6th University Academy chapter. We already involved them para not only on the private, not only on the government, but also on the academe to fully complete the package of the industry. Ilang, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Kala ko lang bibigyan niyo ako sa sakyan pero hindi niyo ako. Pinasakay niyo lang ako dun sa Nissan pero hindi naman binigay sa akin. Anyways, any last words from our resource persons and stakeholders? Any last words? Kung wala naman po, we have some items that we requested from the different agencies, from DTI and EVAP, an extensive study on the benefits of promoting the entire industry, jobs, of course, reduction in carbon emissions and the other things. From EVAP again, a study on the pricing, comparative analysis between ICE vehicles and electric vehicles. And also from EVAP, I understand Dr. Biona also has studies on the health impact of promoting the e-vehicles industry. We also want to get some numbers and research from DTI on the SDGs. We talked about that. You mentioned that it will create positive impacts to the SDGs, and we want to see some numbers on that. DOE, I know you're in the midst of coming up with a comprehensive study on this. As soon as it's ready, we'd like to see and look at the comprehensive study. And the position papers of everyone, sana ay mabigay nyo sa amin as soon as it's ready. The deadline is next Thursday, August 14, for all of those. No? And before we continue, let me acknowledge Senator Bongo, another new member of the Senate.
As promised, no return.
Oh, tapos na ho kami, Senator. We're already wrapping up.
Siguro, if I may interject again, ang hindi ko napakinggan, yung locally produced e-vehicles, the role of the DOST, kung yung imported natin merong incentives, dapat may incentives din yung locally produced by Filipino scientists. So, yun lang po, yun lang idagdag ko. Sorry for being late kasi 5 yung committees na inatenan ko. Sinama ko pa si Senator Bong.
Senator Bong, any comments?
Good morning. Hindi naman po ako member dito sa committee. Sinama lang ako ni Senator Tolentino. Sinuspend muna namin yung organizational meeting ng sports. At pumunta kami rito. Sinama lang niya ako. Anyway, good morning at Mr. Chairman, thank you. Congratulations sa lahat ng narito. puro ko mga kasamahan. Yung sa electric vehicle, may sino taga DOE dito? Energy? Ay sir, yung, yung motor, meron kayong electronic motorcycle, di ba?
Meron po kaming, Senator, meron wrap up po kami yung electric e-trike po na project.
Paki-remind kay Secretary Cusi kung nabigay na ba niya yung pinaraffle ninyo doon sa mga TODA.
Kino-confirm ko po, Senator, na ibigay na po yung pinaraffle po dun sa mga TODA sa Mandaluyong
Kasi nung pumunta ako sa TODA, sabi niya, sir, bakit wala pa yung nabunot namin? 10, paki-remind na lang kay Secretary Cusi, kaya...
Naibigay na po, Mr. Senator, yung sa Pasig.
Ay, yung sa Pasig.
Apo.
Yung iba, paki-remind na lang po baka singilin ako ng mga nanalo.
Wala pong problema.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Go and Senator Tolentino. And once again, thank you to everyone for participating. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Hello everyone. As lunch will be served at 11:30. So stay na lang po para sa lunch. Thank you.